what are the 7 Noahide laws? The short answer is they are a religious fraud masquerading as something that God put in place. Not individually, but as a whole. They're there to try to put people back under the law and get them to take their eyes off of Jesus, which is the real point of the flood. The real covenant that God was setting up with the flood of Noah was the covenant in baptism and in Christianity. That's what the real point of the flood was. When God said to Noah, with you I will establish my covenant, he wasn't talking about the 7 Noahide laws. The 7 Noahide laws are nowhere listed in Genesis where God says, okay, Noah and your descendants, here's these 7 laws I want you and all the rest of mankind to obey. That's not in there. What they do is they take a statement here and they take a statement from there and they add a statement of their own, the 7th law, and they put them all together and say, oh, this is the Noahide covenant. No, it isn't. There is no Noahide covenant of the law like that. The Noahide covenant is a covenant that points to Christ, and that's what I want to show you at the end of this. But the people that don't want you to look to Christ, that want to put you back under the law, they're going to entice you. They're going to try to entice you with these Noahide laws saying, look, we're the Jews, God's special people. They follow all the law and all these regulations. But you Gentiles, you're only obligated to follow the 7 Noahide laws. And if you do it, it's going to unleash an age of peace, an age of purity. Yeah, but you can't do it. You may think you can because the way they phrase them when they start off sounds really easy. But the more you get into it, the harder you find out. It's always like this with the law. They entice you in with all these promises of reward. If you do X, Y, and Z, God is obligated to respond like thus. No, he isn't. No, he isn't. You do the law because you love him and because it's good, and you know that you're not good. But let me show you what the 7 Noahide laws are first, and then I want to show you what the covenant is really for. When God told Noah, with you I'll establish my covenant, what covenant did he mean? If you go to Wikipedia, and I've just copied from the Wikipedia article here, originally these Noahide laws, they don't come from the Bible, they come from the Babylonian Talmud. That ought to be your first clue. Not to worship idols, that's the way Wikipedia puts it. But I'm gonna go to Chabad.org, which is a Orthodox Jewish organization that basically tries to put some meat on the bones of the Noahide law and do what the law always does. When people say, let's follow the law, and it's not about grace, it's not about following Jesus and seeking forgiveness and renewal from within by the Holy Spirit, but us on our own efforts, trying to put God in a position where he's obligated to do some things because of our righteousness. It's been a recipe for disaster for thousands of years. It hasn't helped the Jews. It isn't going to help you. So, not curse God, do not commit murder, don't commit adultery or sexual immorality, don't steal, don't eat flesh torn from a living animal, and to establish courts of justice. Now, the first 6 on those lists, at least God says them somewhere. He doesn't say to Noah, oh, let's establish this covenant with you. Here's 7 things I want everybody to do. That's nowhere in Genesis. They just pick things from here, they pick things from there, and they put it together in a list that they made. God didn't make this list. This is a man-created religion. The 7 Noahide laws are a man-created religion that will not help you gain closeness to God. If you want to gain closeness to God, do not look to the 7 Noahide laws. Look to Jesus. Look to learn about what he did and who he is. And you'll be drawn, lift him up, and you will be drawn to him along with others. So, are these laws bad? No, they're not bad. We're bad. That's why we cannot be delivered by keeping the law. Even if the law is good, these laws individually are good things. But putting them together to form a pseudo-religion, a quasi-religion that God did not really initiate, but yet the rabbis are putting his name on it, that's not good. That's not going to end well. Now, even here, when I copy from the Wikipedia article, it says the 7 laws were given to Adam and subsequently Noah, according to the Talmud. But the rabbis over the centuries disagreed on the exact number of Noahide laws that were given to Adam. 6 of the 7 were exegetically derived from the book of Genesis. But again, that was going through the book of Genesis, and they compiled their own list. God didn't compile the list, as with the 10 Commandments. They compiled this list. The 7th is the vaguest, to establish courts of justice. What does justice mean in this much context? Someone who, for Black Lives Matter, might think justice is one thing. Somebody who's a conservative from the South might think another thing is justice. So, yes, we should have justice. We should pursue justice. What does that mean? And that brings us to Shabbat.org. This is the way that people who are selling obedience to the law as a means to righteousness always do it. They start off by listing them like they do in Wikipedia. But then you go to Shabbat.org, and this is how they say the 7 Noahide laws. So they're claiming there's these 7 Noahide laws, but then you ask 2 different groups exactly what those laws are, and they have different answers. Why? Well, one big reason is God didn't give the list. They are making the list. It's a man-made list, and different men see it differently. Do not profane God's oneness in any way is the way Shabbat.org puts the first commandment. You see how that's different from what Wikipedia says? You see how it would exclude Trinitarian Christians? See? You see what they're really after? They're trying to get us to take our eyes off of Jesus, where God became flesh, where he visited us and took on our infirmities. And they're like, don't look at that. Look at these Noahide laws we made up. Number 2, do not curse your Creator. No matter how angry you may be, do not take it out verbally against your Creator. Have these people not read the Psalms? There's honest pain in the Psalms towards God. They get reconciled by the end of the Psalm, but there's things they say in there that are basically like, God, why are you being so hard on me? God, why don't you do this? The same thing with some of the prophets. When the prophet says, God, surely you wouldn't let your people be punished by someone so evil as the Assyrians, would you? I think it's Habakkuk. And God says, you ain't seen nothing yet. Do not murder. Do not eat a limb of a still living animal. I mean, I think that's barbaric. There's people somewhere that still do it. But I find it strange that it's on this list. Do not steal. And they say here, whatever benefits you receive in this world, make sure that none of them are at the unfair expense of someone else. Well, guys, half the federal budget of the United States is taking money from people who earned it or from the next generation and giving it to people who didn't earn it. So if you take that literally, really maybe we should take that literally. Federal spending would be a lot less than it is. But my point is, many of you who think, oh, these 7 Noahide laws, that looks easy. I think I could do that. If that's all I have to do to be righteous and to bring a better world, sure, I'll sign on with that. But that's not how it is. That's just the easy part, the simple statements or the hook they use to get you in. Then they draw you in and you're doing ever more legalism. And guess what? God is not He is not bound to give you the world you want based on your own righteousness for following this list of laws that they concocted, mostly from things God said, but not completely. Harness and channel the human libido. Oh, there you go. Most of us can't do that anyway, so you should know that and homosexuality would be out of bounds, but fornication would also be out of bounds. Guess what? Going to the websites where there's pornography, that would be, these laws, they're not wrong in their intent, because the sexual act is meant to be given in marriage, in the commitment to another person. That's what God designed it. So it's not wrong. But I'm just saying, you think you can keep the law, you can't. The way they're phrasing it at first just kind of gets you to thinking you can, but then you get in it, you can't. But you know what you can do? you can put your faith in Jesus Christ, throw yourself upon his mercy, he who kept the law for you. That you can do with God's help. Now, established courts of law and justice, again, that's so open-ended. You automatically think, oh yeah, they'll step on the toes I want stepped on, and they'll help out the people I want helped out. You don't know that. You don't know that. Different systems have had different ideas about what justice is. The rabbis who had a midnight trial for Jesus and condemned him even though the witnesses contradicted themselves and sentenced him to death unjustly, they thought they were having a court of law and justice. So it isn't what it seems that what one thinks it is. But let's go back and look at the scriptures in Genesis where God is actually talking about setting up a covenant with Noah. Now, friends, here is where I am at a grave disadvantage, because the Christ-centered model for early Genesis is not like what you've heard. The version of Genesis that most evangelical Christians in the United States have heard is basically the same ones that was handed down from the rabbis. And they haven't got it right because it points to Jesus. Jesus said in John 5:46, if you believed in Moses, you'd believe in me because he wrote about me. What Moses wrote was so much about Jesus that if you didn't see Jesus there, you didn't really believe Moses either. I want us to take a look. So what I'm saying here about the flood, it takes me over 350 pages to make the case for this in the book, and I'm skipping right to it in this video. So this is the part I'm worried that you can't see the reason for here. I've got other videos that fill that in. It's not necessary to. It's a very challenging book. I don't expect everybody to read it, but I've got the videos here that you'll get the gist of it. But I'm skipping ahead. But here we go. Let's go to Genesis chapter 6 and Genesis chapter 9. Genesis chapter 6, he says, "For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that's on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you." Now, this is the line of Messiah and the Genesis chapter 2 works. That Genesis chapter 1 is God creating the world. Genesis chapter 2 is sort of a work within that work. The purpose is to bring Messiah who will redeem all that stuff, the bigger work created in chapter 1. I'm not going to prove that here, but that's what I'm going with for you to see what this covenant is really about. And if you look at the Hebrew, where it says destroy, that word translated destroy in verse 17, and die, those words don't mean quite the same thing as being blotted out in a flood. They mean go to ruin, perish. And they can fairly be translated that way. But there's other words that are used in this Genesis flood account that more directly mean getting blotted out or wiped out in a flood. But here, what God is talking about is if the flood wipes out the whole line of Adam and all the works from chapter 2, which is what we're looking at here, then the world will never be redeemed. It will all go to ruin. It will all perish because it's all going to be drowned in the flood. Now, even the parts that are not, the fish in the sea will be ruined. The seeds of the grass will be ruined. The whole world will go to ruin. Anything not covered will still be ruined because the Messiah will not be born. If we cut off the line of Messiah, Adam was supposed to bring Messiah. The animals formed with him in chapter 2 were to help him establish a more civilized way of living and advance mankind in a way that would get the world ready for Messiah. And so he said, this is going to happen. The world is going to be ruined. It's going to be cut off from Messiah, except I'm going to establish my covenant with you, and we're going to preserve the line of Messiah. Now, let's go to chapter 9, where he says, because in chapter 6, he says, I will establish my covenant. So there'll be two groups of people in the world. There's those in the covenant and those outside the covenant. One is going to perish, one is going to be preserved. In Genesis, and again, I'm doing this like it's way too brief. I mean, I don't really even expect you to buy it all just from listening to me in this one video. You can put it together from the other videos. I've got a blog. If you're a glutton for punishment and somewhat academic, you might consider my book. But let's go to chapter 9. Chapter 6 is where he says, I'm going to establish the covenant. Chapter 9 is where he does it. They come out of the ark. He calls them out of the ark. He says, and you be fruitful and multiply, increase greatly on the earth and multiply in it. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, behold, I establish my covenant with you. Before he said, I shall establish it. Now he says, I establish it with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. It is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you that you have to follow the 7 Noahide laws. No, no, they're making that up. It's not in the Bible. It's in the Talmud. It's not authoritative. They're trying to put you under religion. They're trying to get you to turn your eyes away from Jesus and follow a bunch of religious nonsense that none of their fathers could follow. Don't do that. Read Galatians. Galatians is written to people who are tempted to do something like that. I establish my covenant with you that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. It's the same words used here. Different words are used elsewhere to mean destroy. And that cut off means it's the same term when it says you shall not lack a man to stand before. That's the same term. So basically God is saying, I'll never make it again where you lack a man to stand before me, which would have happened again if Noah had not been saved in the flood, because line of Messiah would have been cut off. And God is saying that that's not going to happen again. I'm not going to. And floods are judgment. Repeatedly in the Bible, water is judgment. The Holy Spirit is rivers of living water. It's God's judgment that brings life. The raging seas, that water is God's destructive judgment on evil. And so he's saying here's my covenant. I'm never going to put you in a situation where you're cut off from Messiah again. The seed that I promised Eve that would crush the serpent's head is going to be preserved. And that's what Genesis is. It's a track of the line of Messiah, tracing the line of Messiah all the way from Adam through Abraham and into Moses. And the promise of the seed and the history of the seed, it's all there. But it's not the 7 Noahide laws, guys. The 7 Noahide laws are a man-made contrivance that lifted out of context some commands from God and then tried to put them into a new religion. If you're going to build a new religion, you don't make it all up. You know, you mix some truth in with the lies so people will swallow it. And that's kind of what they've done with the Noahide laws. But the real covenant that God was establishing was that the waters will purify the line of Messiah, but will not cut off the line of Messiah. And what is that talking about? Think about it. It is speaking of baptism. And I know that many Christian denominations today do not believe that baptism is truly regenerational, is truly a means of grace. That we'll have to have that discussion later. My position is that it is a means of grace, that it isn't just a symbol, but that God does something to us. And it harkens back to the flood. It says in one of the epistles from Peter that the baptism is what the flood was pointing to. Baptism is the antitype of the flood. So when God said, I will set up my covenant, he's pointing to what? Christian baptism, where we do what? We submit to God's judgment. We let the waters pass over us in faith that because of the Lord, and the Lord shut Noah and his family and the animals in the ark. The Lord shut the door of the ark, and the ark was covered with it was like an awning. They used the word cover. It was like an awning, probably made of animal skin, according to the word they used, probably lamb skin, probably sheep skin. So the Lamb of God is covering them so water doesn't get in the top when it rains. And everything about that is pointing to the work of Christ. It's pointing to baptism. It's pointing to when we pass through the waters of God's judgment. We say, I trust you, God. I'm going to submit to your judgment. I ask you to cleanse me. And that which is in us, which is not of the line of Messiah, is washed away in the waters of baptism, the uncleanness. That which is in newness of life is preserved in the ark. And that's the real covenant. The covenant that was set up with Noah is the covenant that we Christians have today. We don't fully grasp the magnificence of it and the perfection of it and how it all fits together. But everything in that Bible, starting from Genesis chapter 1, is pointing to the work and person of Christ. Somehow, churches have still found a way to miss it. And of course, those who want to turn you from your faith, they will try to deceive you. They will try to put in any kind of substitute that appeals to your flesh. Because honestly, the law loves the flesh. The flesh loves the law, even though you can't really keep it. We just love to say, oh, I'm keeping score. I'm doing well here. I've got more points than the other guy. So that's my little talk for today. Please don't fall for the 7 Noahide laws. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you.